Good evening and welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting by Zoom for this Tuesday, September 29th. It's nice to have you with us on this Zoom meeting. And right now, let's have Dee take roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Chapman.
Present.
Councilmember McCall. Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records.
Here.
Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
And Dee, I do see that Eileen is on here as probably audio, but so you've got her marked as present. Okay.
I do, sir. Yes.
Very good. With that, we're announcements tonight. The census deadline has been extended now to October 31st. If you haven't responded already, now's the time to stand up and be counted. I was looking at a brochure that came out for the census 2020. It says that empower your community. Each person counted in Eastern Washington means $30,000 of funding to your community. It helps the federal government spend $675 billion in federal funding. That's how important the census is. So again, there's only 10 short questions, and you have till October 31st. Just go to 2020census.gov. If you've driven eastbound on Highway 270, the Pullman-Moscow Highway, you'll see a billboard right now that says community. It's our effort, 2 universities, 2 cities, 1 community, and how important it is for both communities to wear masks, stay 6 feet apart. I appreciate Mayor Bill Lambert and the Moscow City Council taking a stand, even though there's not a statewide directive. Whitman County numbers are going down, 3 positive in the release today, all college age. Total number now is 1312 with positive. The 1 person who was in a hospital has been released. No deaths in either Lateral or Whitman County. Again, it's very important to wear your masks. I participated in a mayor's exchange with around 70 other mayors on Thursday, sharing something that we've experienced together, COVID-19. Pat Johnson and I spoke about the differences between the 2008 recession and this one. And we shared some suggestions and what cities did with the CARES Fund. And most of those suggestions other cities did, you've read from our residents that have sent notes to the city council and to the mayor. Several of us on the council and staff were guests of the Whitman County Health Network last Wednesday, hearing from health professionals, including Whitman County Health Director Troy Henderson. Some encouraging news with WSU students with all the testing that's being done. He also said some herd immunity now is starting to take effect. So good news also with the Pac-12 starting football and basketball in November. I also want to thank WSU President Kirk Schultz for all the work he did behind the scenes, because at one time it looked like the vote was going to be very close. It actually turned out to be unanimous. So even though there'll be no one in the stands, at least for basketball until a January decision is made, and no one in the stands for football, at least they'll have TV revenue. The Washington, Idaho Symphony is hosting its first ever virtual silent auction fundraiser. We mentioned it before. The second online bid package is open until 5 o'clock tomorrow, September 30th. Bidding is open to everyone. The bid just go to WashingtonIdahoSymphony.org. And Pullman has been recognized nationally by LendEDU as one of the fastest growing U.S. cities that is still affordable for home buyers. The website says Pullman is projected to grow by 13.13% over the next 5 years, and the median monthly cost for Pullman houses, $1,723, which means it's still very affordable despite the trendiness in the real estate market. These figures rank Pullman 678 in the nation, 20th in the state of Washington. Coming up next week is Fire Prevention Week, and we've issued a proclamation that says, whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are locations where people are the greatest risk from fire. And according to the National Fire Protection Association, over the past 5 years, U.S. fire departments responded to an average of 172,000 structure fires that were started by cooking activities. Whereas even though working smoke alarms and reported home fires cut the risk of dying in half, 3 out of 5 home fire deaths result from fires in properties without working smoke alarms. So therefore, Fire Prevention Week is October 4th through the 10th. And we have now proclaimed it that. And the theme this year is serve up fire safety in the kitchen, because that's where most of the fires occur. With that, we now come to our consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And we have Kendall tonight to read the consent agenda. Okay, Kendall, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda this evening consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 15th, 2020, and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable, checks numbered 100961 through 101002, totaling $274,776, and void number 100967. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable, checks numbered 8252020, totaling $32,197.16. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable, checks numbered 101003 through 101021, electronic transfers 632, 634, 635, 637, 638, 639, and payroll direct deposits 63671 through 63964, totaling $1,230,511.77. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable, checks numbered 101022 through 101111, totaling $1,158,063.69. Resolution number R-64-20, a resolution ratifying the mayor's emergency order regarding the city's restaurant, retail, and service recovery plan. Resolution number R-65-20, a resolution authorizing the acceptance of the First Amendment to Federal CARES Act 5311 Operating Grant Agreement number PTD-0195 for Pullman Transit. Resolution number R-66-20, a resolution authorizing acceptance of the Second Amendment to the Universal Transit Access Pass Program Agreement between the City of Pullman and the Community Colleges of Spokane. A motion to amend CARES Act contract and certification to Washington State Department of Commerce CARES Act grant.
Is there any council action that would like to have one of these removed? And seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 9. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And Kendall, since you were on, we want to thank you for your work on that emergency order that we put forth. I know that you did a lot of work on that, so thank you so much.
I did, my pleasure.
We now move to the regular agenda. First of all is a public hearing to consider the City of Pullman and Pullman Transit 2020 to 2026 Transit Development Plan. And with that, here's Wayne Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We do this public hearing annually, and it's divided into two parts. First, it's a look back year in review for 2019, and we do a 6-year transit development plan, which will be submitted to the State Department of Transportation. So any feedback that we can get tonight will be incorporated into the final report before it's submitted to the state. Now for 2019, in general, we renewed the prepaid fare and service contracts with WSU, with the Pullman School District and a local branch of the Spokane Falls Community College. We greatly appreciate their continued support, as these contracts have been in place since 1991 for WSU, 1999 for Pullman School District, and Spokane Falls since 2017. Last year also represented the final year of a phased-in fare increase. Fares had been 50 cents since 1999 and went to 75 cents in 2017. And last year they ended at an even $1. Also last year, we brought several items for discussion to City Council. Among those were an update on our paratransit service, Dial-A-Ride. We also had a discussion on electric bus topics, including related grants on the topic. And we had a productive discussion on the Moscow Pullman bus connection. We went through the RFP process in 2019 for a replacement bus and facility video surveillance system, which currently we have awarded and nearly complete. Keeping up with bus and van replacement is our biggest capital concern, and we continue to rely on an 80-20 match grant program with either state or federal sources, and they provide the 80%. Even with the relatively recent move to hybrid and now electric buses, more than 70% of our fleet is diesel and 25% date from the 1990s. This last year, we received the following two vehicles. We received a Ford Transit van for Dial-A-Ride in February, and that was funded by state special needs funds. Later that year in November, we received what's probably going to be our last electric hybrid bus, and that was funded by state, again, regional mobility grant funds. That's the bus you've seen recently with the water conservation wrap. We also received grant funding for new employee scheduling software, which is the same program used by the fire department, and an upgraded radio base station antenna. 2019 was the year we received the grant for the first two electric buses, which will arrive this coming spring. We applied for two grants in 2019 to upgrade the transit electrical infrastructure and to install electric bus charging stations. Fortunately, it was the second grant that we actually received, and it was through a new state program called the Green Capital Transportation Grant Program, and those two charging stations we expect to be installed this fall. We received federal operating grants in 2019, and that's usually a 2-year grant, which would see us reapplying right about now. But this is the first time it's ever been offered as a 4-year grant. We jumped at the opportunity. So our current operating grant goes into 2023, and we rely heavily on that. Those are federal funds. We rely on that for 25% of our budget. Dial-A-Ride specifically, annual ridership was above 20,000 for the 5th consecutive year, and this was a record high. We served or provided 24,692 rides on Dial-A-Ride in 2019. We also added 2 hours of daily service, which accomplishes two things. Obviously, it's 2 more hours of available service and rides every day, but it also made a driver's shift move from 3/4 time to full time, which is much more likely to be a consistent full-time driver rather than a different driver every day, moving up in seniority. So it's good for the consistency of our service, and that makes 4 full-time Dial-A-Ride shifts. In 2019, for fixed routes, it was the 3rd straight year we saw increased ridership, and in 2019, we provided 1,370,112 rides. The service during the WSU school year is, of course, the most dense time of year for service, and to serve that population, we continued to use the extra shuttle bus approach between 8 and 10 in the morning. Our fixed routes remained on 35-minute loops, and notable service changes in the fixed route system were that we moved the Golden Hills service to the Paradise route. We added Walmart to the Silver route, and the shuttle service I mentioned, we changed those from a combination of short and long loops to an easier to understand, just full express loop system. Our staffing levels didn't change. We still had, in 2019, we still had 32 drivers, 6 dispatchers, 5 bus washers, and 4 members of our management staff, myself included. Investing in studies or on-site training is rare for us, but in February of 2019, we brought in Arthur Gaudet. He's a national consultant who brought us his run-cutting approach to employee scheduling. That's in contrast to a typical, what he calls a mud to the bottom approach, where the undesirable pieces of work, which is often evenings, weekends, and split shifts, those often go to the low seniority employees. He emphasized using what he called a sweet and sour approach, where the seniority should still have its perks, but we try to provide retention incentives to the lower seniority employees, such as some built-in overtime, fewer weekend shifts or less split shifts. And to this day, late in 2020, we continue to use that approach, and I see it has a lot of value in employee retention. Finally, for 2019, other services we provided were the free 4th of July service. So we had 3 newly named routes: the Firecracker, the Roman Candle, and the Sparkler routes. We also participated in the Lentil Festival Parade, and we provided the Park and Ride service for all home WSU football games. That was 2019. The actual transit development plan part of this report is an annual process for all agencies that receive State Department of Transportation funding. Its purpose is to show that we're looking to the future. We plan to maintain and even expand the services that we provide. Basically, we're showing the state that we have some level of responsibility for the system that they're helping to fund. It's also a timeline of what we would like to do if funding allows. But even in that approach, I take a fairly fiscally conservative approach. And in my projections, I've used just 1% service growth and 2% budget growth. This report is supposed to reflect our forecast as 2019 comes to an end. Given the virus situation that began in March, our preparations and our service response are, of course, difficult to ignore. I did make mention of that in the report, of the potential impacts, likely ongoing adjustments, and that's where I believe our low growth model may be helpful. Some services are temporarily reduced, but I can foresee a rebound, or we may even go back to higher levels than pre-virus service, such as a quick turnaround express route loop system, where we only have 10 riders per bus. And if that continues and on-campus classes resume, we'll need to do some quick rides and even add some buses. Overall, looking out 6 years, service will grow over time, but I maintain that it must be both justifiable and sustainable. Over the next 6 years, possible expansions include adding just one more community route. I keep saying, I think just one more would do it. And that's with the goal of trying to get back to 30-minute loops and possibly add a third evening or weekend route that would go with our Weed and Lentil routes. We will continue to expand dollar ride as needed, as we did in 2019 with small increments to the driver shifts. Right now, we have 4 full-time dollar ride shifts, and the way they're spread out throughout the day from about 7 in the morning to 9 at night, all 4 overlap between 1 and 2 p.m. And that's been quite helpful. Besides just investing in the service on the road, we can't forget the system's capital needs. We do have an aging fleet that requires maintenance and eventually replacement. We need to continue to invest in shelters at our bus stops, solar panels for lighting, and the small semi-seats that are called at some of our stops. We also have a larger investment we need to consider, and that's added overnight storage for our buses. We recently brought in 2 used diesel buses to accommodate the 10-person maximum capacity. And we now have 24 buses, but only room inside at night for 18, and that's year-round. So we need to look at capacity for our vehicles and also take the opportunity to improve on the employee break room, and our dispatch facility can be improved upon. When it comes to replacing our vehicles, we try to purchase a bus and a van every other year, but these are heavily grant reliant. We already get more years out of our vehicles than the state average. State guidelines would suggest that a dollar ride van has met its useful life of 5 years. We typically get 7 at least. State guidelines suggest for a bus, it meets its useful life at 12. We get at least 15. In the 2019 report, I just gave you, I touched on the fleet age. 25% of our fleet is from the 1990s, and over 70% are still diesel. That will change as we continue with the commitment that we made as a city to pursue the electrical vehicle path. As before, in previous years, our goals remain to provide a service that is safe, efficient, financially responsible, and sustainable. My plan is to set a future date to bring this report back to you and ask for your approval before I submit to the state. And I would be happy to include any changes that are suggested tonight. Thank you.
Any questions or comments of Wayne on this? I see a hand from Nathan Weller. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Wayne. It's really impressive. You've been doing a great job. I have a question about quick. I received this from one of the community members. A quick charge station for the buses. The question was really for quick charge for cars, but I'm wondering if we have any for the buses.
We don't. Our chargers will be pedestal chargers in the transit shop. I am familiar with the quick charge en route chargers, and they're built into the pavement. They're highly expensive, and the most time that we spend at a location is about 5 minutes at the transfer station. It's not quite enough time. If we had 15 minutes at a location, I think we could get an adequate charge to make a few more loops. But the system that we're investing in is an in-shop pedestal system.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question, Mr. Mayor, if it's all right.
Go ahead.
So Wayne, I have questions. How is the electric with the cold? I think we've had some discussion about this before, but I'd love to hear your opinion and your staff's opinion regarding that. I've heard there's some difference.
Well, we haven't seen it firsthand, but we are hearing from places statewide that have had electric buses. The best resource I've found is Wenatchee, that does get some cold weather as well, and it reduces your full day charge. If you're expected to get 250 miles on a nice sunny July day, you're not going to get that in 20-degree February weather. But we don't need 250 miles year round. If we don't have a long cold spell, my understanding of the technology, of course, from the vendor, it's a great product. From the users in the state, it's an improving product every year, and we should be in good shape. Our hilly terrain especially recharges the batteries as we go, as we slow down, as we brake. It's a terrain made for electric buses.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wayne, let me just ask you one quick question. For those who might be ready to ride Pullman Transit, but they're still a little afraid of, okay, is it going to be safe? And what about mass transit? Because we have seen some of those public opinion polls. You might just share what you're doing with the bus in terms of how it's spaced out. You said there's only 10 per 40-foot bus, but when it's clean between and all that, you might just give us a little bit brief update on that.
Good. Well, it's almost 7:30 at night. Most of our buses are in, and we have a shop full of people cleaning buses right now. And for our vans, it's the second time during the day they've been cleaned. We use a hospital-grade disinfectant, Virex, that's made to kill viruses. We provide hand sanitizers and masks on the buses. We separate our driver as best we can by a well-marked line on the floor where we ask passengers to stay behind that. We have barriers in place for the drivers. Right now, the majority of buses have an actual shower curtain in place, but plexiglass barriers are being installed this fall. We actually have the seats marked out as to which seats can be sat in. If you pick any seat besides one of those 10, and those are measured at 6 feet apart, you'll be sitting on yellow and black caution tape and a laminated sign. So it'll be pretty clear you shouldn't be sitting there. And we're hoping that peer pressure would keep you from doing so. Ridership is less than it was a year ago, of course, but a lot of people rely on it. We're pleased with the response that our staff has given, and all of our drivers wear masks. We ask the public that is medically able to do the same.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions from council? Brandon, I see your hand.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Wayne, thanks for the information. A few years ago, we started to get real-time data. I looked through the the PDF that we had, and but could you touch upon how we're using the data right now to drive that decision making? What are some of the maybe the things that you're doing differently now based on that data? Or what have we learned that maybe we weren't doing before?
Well, if you're talking about in the midst of the virus, the ridership is so low, we probably wouldn't need software to count the ridership. It's around 500 per day. So our goal is to not put more than 10 people on at a time. And that means nobody should be standing, fill the 10 seats, and then the driver doesn't make any more stops. So the data is coming across the radio from the drivers more so than it is through our AVL GPS system. But it's still very, very valuable. I was in this morning early and was able to catch the first round of buses leaving, and noted how prompt they were at their first several stops. I was commenting to our operations supervisor how impressive not only their performance was, but the software answered my question immediately. So the data at this stage isn't nearly as useful as it is when we're in full swing and providing 1.4 million rides a year. That would help us know where to balance loads, maybe where to add service. One additional response we've made to the virus that ties into, I think, what you're asking, is we've put out more buses. Even though we only carry 10 per bus, we have 5 drivers that we have assigned shifts. If they're not driving, they're cleaning buses in the shop. But when they're needed, they'll go out and there'll be a second blue route or a second loop route or a second express route. So when we push 10, we put a second bus out there to handle that. And that's where the data is critical. But when you only have to count to 10, we don't need software right now to do that. But it is going to be very valuable as we continue to grow and expand service.
I guess, yeah, I appreciate that. And I certainly, I know the mayor touched upon it. I certainly did want to know the response for COVID. But this is a 5-year plan, so it's 2020 through 25. So obviously a lot more is in this than certainly just the COVID era. So I guess what I was curious about was what we learned before COVID, what kind of trends we were seeing from the data that maybe we're going to go into the 5-year outlook. How we've shifted and how that has helped.
Okay, I can add a data section to the report, and I think what it would focus on is peak times of the day, maybe parts of town that could use additional service. And even after the virus, I would like to think we can continue that. We call it a tripper approach, where we send a second bus out, and that data is great to look at after the fact. You can see the peaks in the charts, where the numbers peaked, what time of day, what buses, which stops. I don't have the results, but I do think that is a valuable thing to put in what we learned and what we're going to do with it over 6 years. I know we have an issue with we need additional service between, say, 7 and 10 o'clock. That's the coffee route that gets people from downtown to campus. Just one bus can't do that. So if we're going to continue the 3-hour-a-day coffee route, that's one thing. If we can justify more because of the data, maybe turn it into an all-day route because it goes beyond 10 o'clock, that data will be there as well.
With that downtown, I guess I wasn't up to speed on whatever the name of that was. So I believe there was a shuttle. I know when Evolve came in, one of the things that we talked about was there were certainly going to be potentially less cars because the number of spots per the number of beds. And so one of the things offsetting that was that there was going to be a shuttle or bus service that was going to be frequent enough to downtown. Is that still something that we're doing right now? And do we know if there's, I guess, ridership because, obviously people aren't going up to campus as much.
Right. In fact, we're not running the coffee route right now for that very reason. That was its main purpose. And I believe that is the shuttle you're referring to when Evolve was built. Very valuable service. When everything's in full swing, it has a key role to play. So we are downtown twice per half hour with Loop Route. We're downtown every 20 minutes with the Coffee and the Paradise Route. Goes right by the current City Hall every 35 minutes as well. So we have quite a presence downtown, and the focus is getting people from downtown to campus and campus back to downtown.
Thank you, Wayne. Mayor.
Okay, before we go to Nathan, since he's had a chance to speak, anyone other council members that want to make a comment before we go back to Nathan? Okay, I don't see it. So Nathan, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brandon brought up a good point about the analytics data regarding ridership, but I do feel it's important to mention that some of the essential routes that I feel are essential and a lot of community members have expressed include low ridership routes, which have traditionally been to the Community Action Center, where it serves those that are, of limited means. And so I do think though that data is important about ridership, but I would also like to emphasize that some of those essential routes are very, very much more important to remain aside from just the ridership. And I think the other thing I'd like to mention is, that Moscow to Pullman to Moscow route. I've been harping on that for many, many, many years, and I'd love to see a little more discussion regarding that. But I know right now we're facing many other challenges. So just wanted to mention those two things. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to make any comments or before I go back to Brandon, anyone other council members? Okay, Brandon.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councilmember Weller. I think what was going through my mind, and I'm sure Wayne can appreciate this, is, getting that data, certainly there's a consistency that we rely on for transit. Sometimes if you're not sure if it's 45 minutes one day or 15 in another day, right? So consistency is vital. So I guess what I was wondering is if there was a, in that outlook coming, 5 years in advance, what kind of considerations were being made. So if it was low ridership, but it was crucial, like Councilman Weller was saying, do we change vehicles? So maybe instead of the huge bus, when we know there's very little riders, we move to a van. Obviously in COVID, that doesn't give us enough space, but if those were the kind of things that maybe you were using data for. So I think that's kind of where I was going with that, but I fully, wholeheartedly agree with Councilman Weller on that.
As do we. We would use the data to show regular ridership, even if it's low. And Community Action Center will always be served. We'll always continue the current service, if not improve upon it. And there are other pockets. We have identified a few low-income family housing units that are key to our current routes. Some changes we'd love to make, but haven't, because we would lose that service. So very much agree with both of your points.
Thank you.
And Wayne's been working with the Community Action Center too about the Riverview apartments that are also for low income. That's up by the business park. So he's been working with us on that too. If there's no other council comments, now I'm going to ask Rob Larson. Is there anybody in the holding room for comments on this transit development plan?
There's nobody on the line.
Nobody's on the line. With that, I've opened the public hearing. I am now closing the public hearing. And again, as Wayne said, you'll be coming back at a different date for approval from the council. We now move to item number 2 is a motion to approve the CARES Act expenditures. With that, we go to Mike Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Earlier tonight, you approved an addendum to our contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce, accepting $518,400 from the CARES Act grant. So this was something we discussed in a previous meeting that we'd be back tonight to present you some options. So after the last meeting, staff went back to work and worked really quickly to generate some ideas, projects, and put together a list of choices for the council for their discussion and consideration. These were aggregated with some other proposals from past lists that hadn't made it to approval at this time, but didn't want to lose sight of those in case there was an item on there that one of the council members was really interested in. So if you turn your attention to my memo and you look at page 2, I've included, if you wish, for lack of a better term, a menu. There's more than enough items on here at certain dollar amounts that you can spend up to and even over the $518,400, but that's what we've been allotted to. Much like any other menu, some of the items may look really good to you and some of them may look like liver and onions, I guess, but less appealing. And that can certainly be discussed and carried through. We wanted to be comprehensive for your consideration and just put everything out there for that discussion. I'll take a quick pause here. Al, you're on mute.
Okay, Al?
When you're finished, I have a question or a comment on the choices. That's all. Sorry.
No problem. I'll be brief and let council get into their discussion. So just wanted to note that second column, when you're looking at the dollar amounts, there were some items that were certainly identifiable as far as a budget goes. I sent a memo around to the different departments asking what they needed for their PPE and cleaning supplies. So that's a fairly hard number, where all the other numbers that were still somewhat variable, we wanted to put in the up to so council could look at that in its totality. So the trick is when we start looking at different items to stay under that $518,400. So my request tonight from council is that after your discussion of the options, and if there's a consensus reach, you would consider making a motion allowing staff to move forward with those approved items and begin making the purchases ahead of the November deadline. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions in your consideration of this item.
Okay, now we'll go to Al Sorensen.
Okay, am I on there?
Yes, you are.
I've
And then we'll go to Dan Records after that.
We're having some issues here, not in town. So I appreciate all that, Mike, and this is a great list for us. I think it's very helpful on here, and I'd just like to give some of my comments on these choices that have on this menu that's been presented to us. And I first wanted to reference the marketing plan amount there, and I was unable to attend the council meeting when that marketing plan was talked about. And I just want people to know that I do believe that we have some other places that we can work on this from, and some other direction we can take to do what the intent of this marketing thing was. And so I'm not thinking that we want to put this in the CARES Act, and I'm okay with that. There are some other ideas to move around. The one that I want to speak mostly about is, well, I guess it'd be 1, 2, 3. Number 4 on the list here, talking about the small business economic support grants. And I want to give everybody some information. I am currently on the board of SWEETA as a representative from the city of Pullman. And I've been working closely with Don Smith, the director, since all this went on in regards to helping with local businesses in Pullman applying for and obtaining these grants. And in working with Dawn on this and talking to her, it's in my opinion here that I think that it is time for the city of Pullman to jump into the game here, for lack of a better terms, like the county has and the state has and everything else, and help out our businesses that are located in Pullman and do business in Pullman. We need to do something for them. It's time. We haven't put any, as far as I know, financial money into any of these grant programs or anything directly from the city. And I think that it would be really nice to help. SWEDA at this point would be a great way to disperse it to them. I think it would be really hard for us to get a program up and running and run it ourselves. So I have spoken with Dawn, and she would be willing to help to do that and just kind of continue on their current grant program, but make some special guidelines for businesses located in Pullman so that any monies that we put forward could be used only in the city of Pullman. And my glasses broke a minute ago, so now I got to hold them on. And I would think that it would be just really a good thing to do this. The county just recently added another $425,000 to the grant program, and I'm thinking that we ought to be able to help out Pullman. There are 65 Pullman businesses that have applied for the current SWEDA grants. And that's still short of the businesses that we have in Pullman. And I think we could add some money to this, have it run by SWEDA, and they would just have a small fee that we would pay them. I would ask for that fee to be paid for their administration of this. We only pay SWEDA $500 a year anyway, and I think it would help with some of their overhead taking care of just the city of Pullman. And if we were to, and this is a suggestion here, if we were to take 300,000 of this 518 and put it into business grants located in Pullman, we could help out. And if we kept the same parameters, which is up to 10,000 per business, we could help out an additional 30 businesses in Pullman, which according to Don would probably be helping 75 to 100 personnel in Pullman. And, the businesses in Pullman are the ones that are collecting taxes for us. They're the ones that we need to try to support. They're the ones that are having a heck of a time right now with no big events going on and the COVID-19 going on and everything else. So I have a suggestion, and I wanted to get it on the table early, of asking for 300,000 of the 518 and 2.5% basically service fee, which would be 7,500. So a total of $307,500 that we would earmark for the small business economic support grants in the city of Pullman. I think it is well timed, as I've already said, that we try to do some things for the businesses in Pullman. I think we could move through these other things on the list, and I think this is a great list. And if we could help out with the November payroll, 25 grand. We could help out with the safety supplies, 45 grand. We could get 42,000 in for the roof. We could get 12,000 in for the medical response items, and we could get 28,000 into the parks, and up to 12,000 into the facilities maintenance. If we did all those plus the one that I'm talking about, we'd still have 46,000 left over. So I just wanted to throw that in there right at the beginning of the meeting for everybody to chew on a little bit while you're thinking about how you want to spend this money.
Okay, Dan Records, you're next.
So I'll say I pretty much agree with pretty much everything that Al just said. There's a couple of items that I think are less controversial that I want to kind of just highlight, that I think we could maybe knock out of the way and then have some discussion on what the dollar amounts are on some of those other items. But the November payroll reimbursement, the safety supplies, the medical response items, and the facilities enhancements, those ones seem like those are the smaller dollar items, but those are also the very directly CARES response for the safety equipment and those types of measures. And those are going to be what sustains us through the next period of however long this pandemic lasts. The parks equipment, I think I have some questions on about what specifically are we talking about, because replacing porous playground equipment is that my questions about that are all these are people utilizing these right now? Like, are we getting use out of this? What is the disinfectant kind of protocol that we have currently, and is there a disinfectant supply that is not usable on the porous materials? And just some questions about that basically, but that one I just put a kind of question mark on that one. And then the roof, I know that we've gotten some public comment about the roof and whether or not that fits within CARES dollars. I mean, in discussions with Mike and our previous discussions on council, I think that this does meet with what the Treasury guidelines are for it. So I think it is a usable expense for that, but I think it may require some more discussion or explanation so that if we're going to go for that the public is fully aware of how that fits within those guidelines. And then I agree with Al on the Small Business Economic Support Grant. I think that's where we should focus the bulk of these funds. I think we may have some discussion about if there's some dollars we want to put into the COVID-19 testing support to work with WSU and the hospital, but I don't know, what does that kind of program look like? What are the parameters of that? Are we reimbursing for testing supplies so that people can get those without cost? I'm like, I just don't know how complicated that kind of program would be. So I'd ask Mike, what are we looking at with kind of parameters on that? And then on the Small Business Economic Support Grant, I just want, if Mike could comment on the service fee or the administrative fee that Al talked about for SUITA. Just make sure that's in line with kind of what we would expect from any other contract service provider. So those are all my points.
Mike, I think he asked you a question on that, so you could respond. And then I see that Eileen is unmuted, so I'm going to go to Eileen after Mike's answer here. Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, just to hit a couple of the things that I scribbled down really quick, Dan. The playground equipment, the porous stuff, we're really looking at wood equipment that's a difficult one to clean, and some steel ones that have pits and those types of items. As far as a plan to keep those things clean, I can't weigh in on that right now. That's outside of my purview, but I can get that followed up on for you, certainly. I believe Kurt's watching at home. The parameters for the testing, I believe we have talked to not only Pullman Regional Medical, but I think we've also talked to WSU. But I know for sure on the Pullman medical side that it would just be a matter of writing a check to them to either subsidize tests and or expand the amount of testing available. So it's much like turning the dollars over to SUITA, it's a cost that they would manage for us. The fee to SUITA, the 2.5%, is in line with what we're seeing across the state. And this is something that I've actually reached out and talked to Don about as well. So I like the idea that we're putting forward a dollar amount and putting the fee on top of it, so we know exactly what's going to SUITA and what's going to the local businesses. So I'm a fan of that proposition as well. And did I miss something, Dan?
I think you touched all the points. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mike. In meetings with Kirk Schultz and Scott Adams from the hospital, some of that money was trying to help those who don't have an insurance to have those tests. That was another way we were trying to use that money. Eileen, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Sorry to be the landline. I'm having technical difficulties this evening as well. I just wanted to kind of touch on, well, first thing I want to thank Al for going through these numbers and making them make a good deal of sense. I really appreciate the way you explained that. It really comes together, and I hope the public appreciates that. And I also hope that what the public understands is that some of these numbers were just kind of aspirational. They were just categories, as Mike explained. I'm amazed at how much confusion there has been about the so-called marketing plan. We were never intending to spend, $500,000 on a marketing plan. That was never, even remotely under consideration. And I sometimes wonder that we're not being clear enough to the public when I'm picking on Mike here a little bit, but if we're not being clear enough to the public in some of our documents, I mean, we're kind of wonky and these things are maybe a lot easier for us to read, but we've got a lot of pretty heated stuff out there on social media about what we may or may not have been spending here. And to support small business was the idea from the get-go on any plan that we might have come up with. And I think the direct payments to those businesses is probably the best use at this time. Just want to caution us to be absolutely sparkling clear when we're sending messages out that could easily be misconstrued by the public, because that produces, unfortunately, a little more heat than light. And in these times, we need to all be pulling together to support our communities and do the best we can with this public money. And we are being very, very careful, and I hope people appreciate that. So again, thank you, Al, and thanks, Mike, for putting all these numbers together. It's kind of a moving target, and we will have to move fast. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, Nathan, you're next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mike, I agree with my fellow council members who have already spoken, and I think Eileen summed up very nicely what we are feeling, that there was a lot more heat than light. That's a great way to explain it regarding what we were thinking. Yeah, I agree. The marketing plan, not something we should move forward on. The COVID-19 testing, absolutely, as somebody who's really focused on those in need in our community. And I know with Mayor Johnson sitting on the Community Action Center board and others doing similar work with those in need, this is really important. And I know Haley had discussed this from SEL, and WSU has stepped up with this as well. And especially with what Mayor Johnson, and I applaud Mayor Johnson and our city across the border in coming together in one community. This is really, really important for us to do. I also share some of the questions that Dan was expressing with the parks equipment. I can just explain from my own experiences over here at McGee, there's not a whole lot of people that do use them, but I know they are important for our community. Now with winter coming up, I'm not sure how important it is to put a rush on that. So I just wanted to mention my own solidarity with my fellow council members in what they've already expressed. And again, thank you, Mayor Johnson, for stepping up and saying one community between this whole region. So anyways, that's all from me.
Thank you. Pat Wright, I see that you wanted to say something here. Pat?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with the comments of all of the council members that went before me. I think we heard loud and clear that the marketing plan was not something that our constituents were wanting us to pursue. And so I think we have been very prudent in removing that from the menu, if you will. One item that I would just like to, maybe Mike can talk to it a little bit. There seems to be some either misinformation or incorrect information in regard to the cost of the COVID testing. And there are some people under the belief that since the National Guard is handling that testing for WSU, that now all of a sudden the testing is free. As we all know, nothing is free. So I would just like Mike to maybe clarify that there are costs involved in our supporting the COVID testing as it's listed here.
In all the meetings we've had, National Guard's doing the testing, but it's $100 per test is what the normal figure is that the university's been engaging in. And Kirk Schultz stepped up to say, we're going to cover it right now to make sure that all the students and staff and faculty are checked as well. But it was $100 a test is what we were hearing.
Well, and as I say, I think there's some misinformation out there in the public that since National Guard is involved, that there is no cost associated with the testing. So I just wanted to make that crystal clear out there that we do have costs. And I absolutely support the small business economic support grants. I don't think that we can do enough to ensure that our businesses stay as healthy as they can during this. So I'm really pleased to see this whole list. And as far as I'm concerned, it kind of is in priority order as it's been presented up to item number 4, which is the grant process. And then I think everything else, actually what I would do is move the medical response items up and make that maybe item number 5. And then everything else we can kind of negotiate on. But I think that the top 5, as I just presented, are the ones of most importance. Thank you.
Mike will let you respond. I'm going to Ann Parks, and then we'll go to Brandon. Okay, so Ann, you'll be next after Mike.
Sure, and I just wanted to circle back on a couple things and just explain to council what the genesis of the parks equipment was. That I'd been talking to several members of the council and some staff members, and I was challenged to go find some projects out there that had a broader community support, especially to some of the groups maybe that hadn't seen any benefits from any of the CARES dollars yet. So I got into a discussion with Kurt Damon and Alan Davis and challenged them to go look through their equipment and see what we can do in some of these parks to maybe just really get equipment in there that would help not spread or transmit and make some replacements. So I was just really trying to round out the menu with that item. So they're there, and there's certainly some items that can be considered. Back up to the roof, this thing had been, kind of constantly churning for the last couple months. I'm not before you advocating for this tonight. I just wanted to make sure that you hadn't lost sight of it, that it was an option. But seeing as how the payroll has been running through and it's coming in higher with the amount of hours that our staff's putting in, I'm looking at other places to hit and miss. So if this isn't an item that council feels comfortable with, believe me, I would be more than happy to see that number redirected to helping fill the payroll gap, because everybody's August numbers are due into me on Friday, and we long surpassed the $300,000 that I originally thought we were going to be using for CARES dollars for backfilling our payroll. We're well into 415,000, and still I have August, September, October, and November now to go.
Okay, Ann Parks, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start by saying that what started this whole firestorm that some of the council members have referred to is a statement by a council member a few meetings ago that this person thought it would be good to put CARES dollars money into a tourism campaign. So, and we immediately did see the response from our constituencies, from our residents, that no, this was not the right time. It was not the right use of those dollars. The primary two things that I've been seeing, we've all been hearing, are we want to make sure our city employees are taken care of, and we want to make sure our small businesses are taken care of. And this list clearly reflects that. So I agree with everybody else that these are great projects, and I fully support all of them in some way or another. And if we choose to put some of them off for a little bit, I'm fine with that too. Thank you.
Brandon's next, then Nathan, and then we'll go to Al. Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate everything that my fellow council members have said. Just I guess maybe a point of clarification. I think kids are using some of the equipment, but it might not be at McGee Park. But those are the kind of things that I think maybe we can look at from potentially other funds. And I don't know if it's Metro Parks or other things like that. And, in terms of CARES dollars, Councilmember Wright said, she used the phrase "our constituents," and I think that's really the key. And we all have received so many emails and other communications from people in the last 3 weeks. I feel like if they're confused, then maybe we need to communicate better. If they're unhappy with something, then we really just need to listen. And to me, the residents that we represent are saying, they want to keep our staff employed. They don't necessarily want furloughs. They want to make sure that our first responders have PPE. There are many people who are interested in things such as testing. WSU now is even opening up testing for asymptomatic, and I'm surely that's a huge cost, as Councilmember Wright mentions, that nothing is free. The couple things that I know have stood out is whether it was well intentioned, maybe it wasn't articulated well, maybe it was misunderstood, but folks didn't necessarily like the idea of the marketing plan. Okay, well, we learned from that. The other one is I've heard from so many people, whether it's a justified expense or not, they don't want to see any kind of more expenditures on the new city hall. Whether it's the roof, whether it's other things, they don't want to see it. And I'm sure you've all seen some of those emails that have come into all of us. So I think we need to respect that and look for other sources for those kind of monies, and just look at what is it that residents are really wanting. And amid all those things that I've mentioned, the one that keeps coming back is, let's find a way to stimulate business. Let's find a way to do business grants. And Councilman Sorensen mentions maybe even partnering with SWEDA or another entity. If we do that, maybe we can control how that's being done and keep it within Pullman. But I think that might be the way to go. Let's find a way to prop up our businesses. Let's find a way to help them weather the storm, because if those businesses close, or we keep getting businesses closed, when we start coming out of COVID, we still won't get as much sales tax revenue because we won't have as many businesses open. And if we're talking about downtown revitalization and having foot traffic, we got to have businesses where that foot traffic can go. So I really think that that's a wise way to do it. It is certainly in line with what our constituents are saying right now. So I applaud Councilman Sorensen for bringing that up. And for me, I think that's the direction that is both, I think, responsible and also responsive to the residents.
Okay, we'll go to Nathan, then we'll go to Al Sorensen. Nathan?
Thank you, Glenn, for letting me go again. Yeah, I think absolutely what Pat and Brandon have already said. Constituents, they've spoken, and this is important for us to listen. I think also it needs to be mentioned that businesses, with the SWEDA grant, I'm actually someone who applied for that, and it's very, very easy. So businesses out there who haven't heard about it, I know Al will have more information than I will regarding it, but getting that information out to the businesses who are feeling that pinch, that's really important. I know Dawn has been working very, very diligently on it, trying to get the word out here in Pullman. Whitman County has been responding to it as well, but Pullman really, really needs to get on board with that. The other thing to mention is, we've been talking about the first kind of COVID test, but what I believe it was Brandon mentioned was the asymptomatic cases as well. And this is something that I didn't know until I started discussing with some of the healthcare providers. It's not only that initial test, which some insurances will cover, it's the second and third tests that may be required by businesses for employees to come back. And a lot of those are not covered. And so it's important to keep that in mind. It's not only the initial, it's also the tertiary ones that are being required for everybody's safety. So that was all I had to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Al Sorensen.
Yeah, it's great to hear everybody backing up our small businesses in Pullman and wanting to help them out as much as possible. And I kind of threw a number out there, and I'd even like to expand that to where, once we know what we want to spend on these other things, anything left over and there it goes. So I'm not trying to limit this at the 300 I'm talking about. Let's do as much as we possibly can there and include that fee. And in regards to the distribution and how it could be handled, I really do think that the best way to do this is to tie in with Sweeta and Brandon. It's already been talked about. It's very easy for them to make sure that, any money that comes from Pullman specifically will be awarded to only Pullman businesses. Okay, that's easy to track, easy to take care of. If Sweeta does this for us, they'll keep all the records. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and the program is already in play. So then it's just a matter of getting things moving. For Mike, go ahead. Tell me what you're going to say.
No, I agreed with you, Alan. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did talk to Dawn about it. And as far as the management fee goes, she's certainly earning that with going through the applications and doing all the processing to the point where she's filling out the A19s for me, sending that up so we can go get the reimbursement right away. So it's a full service component, and we will have documents on hand. So when we go through the state audit on this next year, we'll be tight. So no, she's running the program is really solid, and we talked about it for almost 45 minutes, and I felt really good when I left that discussion.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and I knew that from all my conversations too. And I think we really do need to help promote this when this happens, and we need to have our economic development department work on continuing to get the word out, and not just through social media, but some personal contacts, some phone calls, okay, here's the list of who's already applied, and we need to do some additional help to get more businesses applying that already have it. So it's ready to go. Everybody's on board, and it sounds like everybody on the council's pretty much on board. So again, I would say every penny we can get to move into that, we work it out to do that. Thank you.
Mike, you were okay. We'll go back to Brandon, then I'll go back to Mike. Okay?
I just wanted to know if we could have our economic development director chime in and I guess give her thoughts on this, because we went from talking about a $30,000 marketing plan to $300,000 for businesses. I'd love to get her take.
Okay, Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I absolutely concur. I have also been talking with Dawn and know that 65 businesses in Pullman have already applied and been approved, and then an additional 10 are kind of waiting and then calling out to businesses. And I know about, based on my calls, I know just in recent days that she should be expecting about 10 more. And I'm happy to continue doing that. I've been really focused on businesses that are not receiving my normal emails, and businesses that I know may not have gotten connected with, in another way by Dawn and Sweeta. So I am absolutely on board with that. And I know that from conversations with Dawn that there are a couple different ways that the funds can be used. They can either be used to add more grants for more businesses, or, for a lot of businesses, $10,000 is not enough. So that is, if we can make the agreement somewhat flexible, that would give Sweeta some flexibility to even increase the amount if it's warranted.
Okay, Dan, I saw your hand. Okay.
And I don't know, maybe this is a question for Al or maybe Mike, but under the current Sweeta grant principles, are those available to nonprofits as well as privately owned businesses?
They are not, Dan. Nonprofits are excluded from the grants, this current suite of grant, and I'm in favor of that continuing in that way.
Some of the nonprofits have been getting money from a couple of other agencies and some state, and I know that Innovia has also come up with some money for some nonprofits in the area too.
Right.
So,
I also just wanted to concur with Al on, if we could set the dollar amounts on some of these other items, that whatever's left over should go into this business grant program. I did want to say one thing about the marketing plan. I know that, we're pretty much all off the table on the marketing plan for the CARES Act dollars at this point, but Anne's comment, I think, about, members of the community thinking, what those thoughts were about that marketing plan. And when we talked about that previously, I just wanted for clarification, I never envisioned that would be something to like promote tourism during the pandemic, to bring people in while we're still a hot spot. And I know that was a big concern for a lot of people. What I thought we had talked about was that we would potentially put together something to have a plan ready for when we turn the page into being safe to welcome people and encourage people to come back to Pullman. And I think that is something that long-term is still something that we may want to look at engaging in some sort of marketing program in the future. But I think, putting that off the table now and not using CARES Act dollars for that is clearly what the community is indicating that they want to see. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
and the reason why they were rushing on that RFP was just because we had a deadline that money had to be spent by a certain time. Mike, we'll go back to you.
I'm still gathering, sorry, Mayor, I'm still gathering thoughts from different council members and trying to put it to a number here. And I know there's some other questions. I think I saw Pat and Al's hands both up.
Okay, we'll go to Al and then we'll go to Pat.
Hey, yeah. Hey, Dan, I missed that in one meeting, so I would have been able to fill you in on a little bit. And that the marketing plan for Pullman was totally intended for something different, like what you're talking about now. And like I said at the start of my conversation, that is something that we can pursue and we should pursue 100% through a different way, not through the CARES Act. And there are certainly different ways that we can do it. I've already checked into it with different entities. So I think that is something that we absolutely need to do. If we're going to help our businesses do this, we need to help them get back on their feet when things turn the corner. I would ask Jennifer a little bit. So Jennifer, in regards to contacting the businesses in town, are you physically contacting them? Who are you contacting? How do you know who to contact and that kind of thing?
So Al, I am calling businesses primarily versus visiting door to door, but and I've had success calling and leaving voicemails for the business owners.
And you have a list of people that you know that have not already applied, or you're just going
I don't have that list. I think once we, if we approve dollars, I can work with Dawn to find out who has applied, because I don't know. I don't have that list.
Okay, well, we'll certainly make sure that you do have that list, because you're going to be a huge part of this in regards to helping us contact other additional businesses in Pullman, and we need to direct contact them. Social media is and an email is not enough contact. It has to be more personal. This is a personal time. This is a personal activity that needs handling with good gloves on your hands.
Right. So I have a list from the Department of Revenue that provides, if the business owner has provided it, their name, their contact information. So that's what I've been using.
Okay. Well, we'll get the list of all the 700 or 1,000 businesses that you have in Pullman, and we'll go through that with the list that Sweeta has already talked to and got applications on, and then we'll make sure that you're able to contact those other people directly. I just want everybody to know I am involved with this, and I'm going to maintain staying involved with this from now until we're done with it, just so you know.
We have a lot of staff working on it too. So Pat Wright, you're next.
Well, I just would like some clarification on the status of the nonprofits. So they can apply, they're eligible to apply. I understand that other counties in the SWEDA area have been with nonprofits, have been applying for grants through them. But I want to make sure that we're not precluding our nonprofits in Pullman from being able to apply for these grants, if that made any sense.
Do you want me to talk, Glenn, or?
Jennifer, why don't we go to Jennifer? If you've heard some things contrary to that, what SWEDA is doing in terms of that, then we'll go to Al.
You know, I would need to, I can look that up. I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that Whitman County also made some of its other CARES dollars available to nonprofits, I believe. And so it's likely that Whitman's CARES grants for businesses is just for small businesses, but I'd be happy to look into that.
And I know Community Action Center has received some CARES money in terms of some of those donations. Al?
Yeah, and Mike, you have a copy of the most current SWEDA grant application, and Nathan, I don't know if you still remember seeing yours that you filled out, but it does specifically say that nonprofits are not eligible for this particular go around, and there are so many other things going on. So I don't know what you're hearing, Pat, in regards to other counties that are in SWEDA. I don't believe that's true. I believe that they've been excluded as nonprofits. Now, there are lots of different kinds of businesses out there, and they may say they're a nonprofit, but when you turn around and look at the actual physical entity, they are not. So we can get certainly some clarification on that, but there have been so many other doors open for the nonprofits that they're able to get their money in other places. Mike, you were going to drop in on that, I think.
I'm rereading this because the first thing I was reading on the SWEDA site is just to Asotin and Garfield County. Let me see what page 3 says here about Whitman County. Because there is, yeah, you're right. It does say on here in bold letters, nonprofits will not qualify for this funding.
The nonprofits got money in the first funding, not just on the second one. Okay. Okay. Now, I think we've heard from everyone. Jenna, I see your hands back up again.
No, I just want to acknowledge that Asotin County does have a nonprofit grant that it looks like they're using some of their CARES funding and pushing that through SWEDA. Whitman County kind of made its own decisions, and I believe they did make a grant available for nonprofits up to $1,000, but different counties have kind of done what you're doing right now, is to look at a menu based on their own profiles of their counties.
So Mike, as we first started out here tonight in your presentation, you were looking for some kind of consensus coming from the council. I've been hearing that consensus in terms of where the money should go. You're basically saying right now that you want a motion to approve the CARES Act expenditures, but you're going to come back with specifics at the next meeting. Is that, or you want to have specifics now?
I would, because of delivery on certain items and a continuing, timeline. Next week is our public hearing for revenues for 2021. Unless council would like another week to deliberate on this, I was hoping that they'd come to a consensus tonight, and we can start funding some of these items.
Okay, and you heard a presentation from Al right away with the 300,000, and then the 2.5% for handling. And you saw some others that would go into that, and some comments from Pat as far as where some of that money. So, yes. Do you want to restate the numbers?
Sure. In my quick math here, and it sounds like there was not any resistance, and please, council, correct me if I'm wrong, to the payroll item, the safety supplies, the medical response items, and the facility enhancements, those for what I call low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term. I didn't see a whole lot of pushback and perhaps some consensus. Is that the feeling of the council?
Yes.
Seeing some hand nods. Brandon, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so would you say facility enhancements? What are you talking about, Mike?
To continue upgrading facility items for touchless activate items, remote presence operations, and antimicrobial surfaces. So
Okay,
taking
that
our
part of it.
existing facilities that are forward facing and making them safer for staff and the public.
Okay, that part I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay.
So if you add those 4 items together, that's 93,750, which leaves $424,650 for further discussion.
What's that number again, please? 400.
424,650.
Thank you.
Did that include the medical response items?
It did.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe we can just go down the list. I mean, instead of
Let's
bouncing.
Since we have the list in front of us, that probably would be.
Or just identify the items that we're not going to consider.
Good way. Okay.
I think if it pleases the council, I'll go down the list, and the November payroll items at $25,000 was part of that original 93.
Yeah. And you said that might go higher.
I think it already is higher. So if council comes in with a lower amount on if there's any discussion as to any leftover amount, I would certainly, it would make me feel comfortable if we boosted that a little bit. But I don't want to detract from any other discussion right now.
Is there a way that we could word that so that we have a dollar amount up to a certain amount that would cover the payroll without having to get too specific? Can you ballpark that at all, Mike?
Up to 50?
I could. And Al, I'm going to ask you to jump back in on this too, because I think this is part of the discussion is from your conversations with Sweta, if there's more than $300,000 to give out, do you believe it will all be given out, or do you think there's going to be residual? Because that's something that crossed my mind here as we were sitting there talking.
It'll all get given out.
So
we can give it out. There's a need.
Okay.
Eileen, did you have some comments?
Glenn, I think we're good. I think Dan clarified the thing about the marketing plan, and we just need to keep in mind that we need to build capacity and capability for the future of our community. When I go to get in my car, I fasten my seatbelt whether I'm going 2 blocks or whether I'm going 20 miles. So we need to be keeping that sort of on the back burner, whether it's not a part of this funding or not. Is that we need to be looking at that marketing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nathan, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what Mike brought up is a good question. Councilman Sorensen, I wanted to ask, I know when I talked with Dawn, and this was, over a month ago, she had said that she was having some challenges reaching businesses and giving out money to Pullman, that Pullman was the most difficult location to give money out. That Whitman County around Pullman was very responsive, but that there's been some challenges here in Pullman. So I think Mike brings up a good point. I don't know where that CARES funding would go. If there's extra, I'm assuming it would be, give it back. But so that is something that I would be interested in. And if all the money from the current CARES funding in Sweta has been used, I know the deadline is extended to October 15th.
So let's go back to what Pat suggested originally. Let's talk about the ones that we're not going to fund with this, and then we can figure out where we're at. That was a good suggestion from Pat. So the marketing plan, I heard, is off the table. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The roof repairs was off the table, correct? Okay.
Correct.
that leaves us with, I'm still hearing some debate on the park equipment. But can we spend that money and can it be installed within that deadline? That's the question I have. Or is it just the purchase of the equipment?
It's the way I'm reading the guidance, it's the purchase of the equipment with an installation plan. This is just, like I said, something we wanted to bring council to bring a full plate of items. I know there's been a lot of strong talk about testing and economic support. This is just another consideration.
And I've certainly seen a lot of people at Sunnyside Park, and that's what we're hearing from some of the parents, that they've been so grateful, at least they could get the kids out to the parks. So,
and there is Metro Parks dollars.
A lot at McGee. There's definitely at other parks, I'll tell you. So,
yeah, and Brandon was right when he brought up that there was Metro Parks dollars too. So, just another option.
Have those not been allocated? The Metro Park District?
Oh, we get property tax from them every year.
Okay. So we've eliminated, where are we at with COVID-19 testing? I sort of heard positives on that one, to help on some of the testing for those who could not afford it, and parks.
I very much agree that it's needed. I'm concerned about how that would be administered and by whom. I'm not sure, Mike, if there's a plan in place of who we would partner with or how that would be handled.
I can tell you right now that I've had meetings with, again, with Kirk Schultz, president of WSU, and also with the head of the Pullman Regional Hospital, Scott Adams. And we've got a group together that's going to try and help on that, to try and that's where that will involve the school district as well.
Okay, because I would like to see it be used, as was mentioned, for people who just can't afford it, and make it somehow be available to those who don't have insurance or don't have other means. So I'm not that, but I would be in favor of that for sure.
Dan, I see your hand.
On that point, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of, not just reimbursing, it's not like we're talking about reimbursing individuals for those tests. It's more like the hospital may get a chunk of that money, and then for people that come in that need a test but can't pay for it, instead of the hospital paying out of their funds for that, they'd have these funds available to pay for that. Is that kind of what we're talking about, Glenn?
That was correct.
Yeah. I like that idea. I think the hospital is probably the best entity to handle it for our community members as well.
Pat, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Al.
This isn't a COVID question, Glenn. This would be going back to the small business grant process. And with SWEDA doing the administration of this, would we, as a municipality, have the ability to set the criteria for which these grants are considered and approved? So, for example, if someone has already received a grant, would they be considered in a lower category than someone who is just for the first time submitting an application? Or there are certain tax implications involved. So are we able to set the criteria? Mike, do you have an answer for that, or even Al?
I do. We are, since we partner with SWEDA, we would be subject to their rules, and their rules do state, and I think they actually use the words, there is no double dipping. So if you've already received one of these grants, then, we're moving on to the next person.
Okay. Thank you.
So going back to ones that are not on the list, we definitely have roof off, we have marketing plan, we have facility, the roof, the other facility enhancements for no touch was still on the list. I want to make sure, Mike, you've got the same list that I've got. And
yeah, I have the payroll, the safety supplies, the medical response items, the facility enhancements, and then we're just trying to come up with a dollar amount for the economic support grant. There's, for COVID-19 testing, there's interest in that. That's what I have.
And I just want to make sure that, can you give us a rough approximation of what you might need for November payroll reimbursements? Up to 50,000?
Yeah, I mean, we're through July right now. The August stuff is rolling in this week. We're already over, but I'd had some money tucked away for the roof that we didn't use. We're going to go over the payroll amount. So whatever the council feels like is not included in the testing and not included in the small business grants, I would certainly like to see move back towards payroll to help with some of those other months.
Because that was one of the council's dictates. We want to make sure we take care of our employees.
Right.
And
we certainly are. It's just the reimbursement part of it.
okay. Al, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so Pat, we certainly have the right to let SWETA know that those grants have to be used in the city of Pullman, and there is no double dipping. People that have already received them aren't going to get additional at this point. There are, if we get the amount of money in there, there's already, 10 to 15 of them already sitting there that haven't been funded. Jennifer says she's got another 10 going in possibly that she's talked to. There's going to be plenty of grant applications to take care of the funds, and there won't be additional dipping on this. And the program is set, and I think the program is good. The application is easy, and everything else. So back to the other numbers on this, I think we need to set the numbers and just kind of be done with it.
We're trying to get
how the 518 gets spent, period. Not
so
the or this amount or whatever. Let's set them.
So the original figure came out to 424,650, right?
Right.
So if you actually increase the grants to local businesses at 360, that takes you to 500,000 roughly. And then that would give you some additional money that you could possibly use for your November payroll. But then you have to have the other numbers set too. So I'm open. Dan, go to you.
One suggestion I would have for the payroll is to just set a number on it up to, and then if there's, if we don't hit that, take whatever's left over and dump that back into the business grant.
Okay.
Flexibility on that one. I think, for the Parks and Rec, I'm in favor of not including that in the CARES Act dollars if there are Metro Parks District dollars for it. Also, somebody brought up a point earlier of, as we're heading into winter, we're with the ordering time frame to get these equipment in and then get them installed. Are they actually going to be utilized anytime soon? And so should we be redirecting those dollars somewhere else if we have dollars in the Metro Parks District? If we're looking at, I think the way we should approach this is maybe set the number on testing, and then I think everybody's pretty much given their support for kind of the bulk of this going towards the grant program. So I think if we set the number on the payroll and then set the number on the testing, and then up to those amounts and whatever's left over, once we start to get a clearer picture of the payroll, put that additional amount back in the business grant program as well. That would be my approach.
I agree.
Yeah, Mike, you've been going along. So if we actually did on COVID testing, 30,000 allocated for that, and in addition to like we talked about, possibly 360,000 for the grants for the small businesses, and then using your other numbers that you already have here, would you be close to 518 or somewhere in that neighborhood?
And Glenn, that 360, I think we need to add the 2.5% fee on top. Okay, so that number's a little bigger than just 360. Right. And I do think that we need to direct where the dollars are going to go for the testing. I think it's got to go to the hospital. That's where I would like to see it go also, and be distributed through the hospital, not to other organizations. I think it needs to go to our local hospital.
Right now, the hospital is doing testing for those that have a doctor's slip. They've changed things off a little bit. So Palouse Medical, Pullman Family are all doing testing. and they may have some people there that do not have insurance that might be carried. So I'd like to have a little broader there. Of course, the hospital is doing the business management for all three of those. So if we could say the hospital could be dispersed to Pullman Family Medicine or Palouse Medical, that would cover the range. If I see Pat giving me a nod on that one. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay, Mike?
Sure. So just some quick math based on this discussion. If we were to take the 4 items that we already, seems like we got consensus on, if we were to take 30,000 out of what was left, that's $3,100 tests. That's a lot of tests, and to Pullman Regional for administering that. If we were to add our service fee to $360,000 worth of business grants to go to SWEDA, that's $369,000. So that leaves $25,650, and that puts us very close to the $50,000 number that I've heard discussed to carry us on the payroll. If that's something the council feels good about, I think you're there.
Yep, I would concur with that.
Sounds good.
Okay, with those numbers then, since we have this as an item number 2, do I hear a motion to approve the CARES Act expenditures?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
I'm going to go to D, who's has it on electronically, and you can tell me you've got it. Okay. So it's a motion to approve
I
CARES
believe
Act expenditures, and you've got it, right, D?
I got Pat. I got Pat making the motion and Nathan seconding.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, council. Appreciate all your hard deliberation on this. We'll get to work on it right away.
Good.
And I
Thank
think-
you, Mike, for your work on this as well. It
Mike.
took a lot of brain power to get us here.
On behalf of our residents, they appreciate you reading all the emails that have come in, including several, 4 or 5 just today or tonight.
Yep.
Okay. We have now item number 3 is a motion to authorize staff to submit a grant application to Washington Department of Transportation for a transit operating grant. And we bring back Wayne Thompson.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it looks like I was in error with the topic description. This grant in question is a capital grant, not operating. Now, we have the opportunity every 2 years to apply for grant funding through the State Department of Transportation's Consolidated Grant Program. This can be for either operating or capital projects and is our best access to both state and federal funding. Fortunately, we're already in the midst of a 4-year operating grant, so that's another 2 years away before we need to reapply. We realize this is a trying time for revenue, and that's why we're not asking for an expansion or a facility upgrade project. We eventually do want to expand evening and weekend service and to get routes back on 30-minute loops. Plus, approximately 20% of our fleet is housed outside, as I mentioned earlier this evening, year-round. So a facility expansion project eventually is needed as well. These will all wait till later when funding is more secure. Since these grants only come in 2-year cycles, I don't believe we can afford to pass on an opportunity to continue our cycle of bus replacement. We have already gone 8 years at one point in history without a bus purchase, and that was when the first car tab initiative hit in 1999. And now over a quarter of our buses date to the 1990s, and the majority are still diesels. What I'm asking for is your support to apply for a new bus, an electric bus. The vehicle purchase will continue our transition to an all-electric bus fleet, and it will be our 3rd overall. The estimated cost of the bus is over $890,000, so an 80% grant match is definitely required. If our application is successful, we wouldn't place the order until mid-2021 and wouldn't receive the bus and pay for it until late 2022. And based on my transit development plan projections, the transit revenue at that point would be over $3 million, and our local match would be $178,000. And I'm requesting approval to apply for this grant funding opportunity, and I would bring the actual application to you for final approval at your October 20th meeting.
Any comments from the council? Seeing none, do I hear a motion then on this to authorize staff for this transit capital grant?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, it is a motion to authorize staff to submit a grant application to Washington State Department of Transportation for a transit capital grant. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. That will move now to item number 4 is a motion to authorize the acceptance of the Fire Department FEMA Safer Grant. And you'll see a long memo there from Mike Heston and Ray Lamoureux. So Mike Heston, we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. So in your packet, you have a grant acceptance email memo from me and a cost breakout on this grant. We did a May 5th presentation to Council on this grant with the initial direction and guidance from FEMA for retaining staff in case of any potential layoffs. But in July, they called us back and clarified that they couldn't do that. They could only do it for new firefighters for 3 years. We figured we had a low chance of getting this grant because it wasn't what we put in for, but we actually became successful for it, surprisingly. So, and what kind of makes this unique is this particular grant, the FEMA has decided because of COVID to waive the match that the city has to provide. So with this opportunity, we wanted to present this to council for consideration. So I'd like to have Deputy Chief Lamoureux, who was instrumental in bringing this idea forward, to let him explain the grant part of the spreadsheet.
Thank you, Chief. Like the Chief said, obviously we were originally looking to retain in case of a reduction of force. But it became clear as FEMA started having correspondence with me that they were not going to allow this. So at that point, they asked if we wanted to move forward. I says I didn't have that authority, but we would bring it to council and see what council said. So since then, though, like Chief said, we have been notified that the normal 25, 65% match, which would have cost the city roughly $387, $381 to cover the salary and benefits for the 3 years of the grant, has been waived. So we have, it literally cost the city $0 to go for this grant. So the proposal that I wanted to bring to council tonight is trying to save some dollars in our budget over the next 3 years. Right now, minimum staffing is 8, 4 firefighters at Station 1, 4 firefighters at Station 2. That's what it takes to operate 2 fire engines and 2 medic units every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The problem that this generates is if one person calls out sick or uses last minute leave, it automatically triggers an overtime event for us. So what we're proposing to do is we currently have 2 float firefighters. We would take one of the float firefighters and move them to shift and hire these 3 firefighters, which would increase our daily staffing to 9, but not increase the minimum staffing. And that's the key that's gonna make more sense as I move forward and show you the savings that we could potentially see. With that, time off allowances wouldn't change. So the current vacation policies would stay the same. They wouldn't be allowed to take any more time off than they already do. So by increasing our daily shift staffing, but keeping the minimum staffing at 8, that gives us a buffer position. And what that allows is for one person to call in sick or use last minute leave without triggering overtime.
So in 2019, I went back and looked at that data set, since that's the most recent full year's data that we have. And I found that we had 234 occurrences of overtime. Now, these occurrences can be partial shifts, they can be full shifts, but we had 234 times where the fire department paid overtime out, that had we had this buffer position in place, those 234 occurrences wouldn't have had to have been paid out. That dollar figure roughly is about $235,000 in overtime in 2019 that the city could have saved by having one extra firefighter on per day. So how does that look when we start tossing the SAFER grant numbers, or in this case, the lack of matching dollars in there? In year one, we would realize a savings of about $60,680. The reason why this is lower, as you'll see on your spreadsheet, than all the other years is, should council approve this, we would hire them to get into the January academy. So by the time they went through academy, came back, finished up their in-house training, and they got on shift, we would only realize overtime savings for half the year. Plus there's the expense of sending them to the academy, buying them gear. So that's why that first year of savings is only around $60,680. In year two is where we feel the full effect of this overtime savings, because these guys are already counting members. So based off of the overtime tracking that Chief Heston has, we estimate we could save $242,421 in the second year of the grant, and $249,694 in the third year. So over the 3-year life of this grant, we would roughly save about $552,796 in overtime out of the fire department's budget. To date, so I ran a report today and went through 2020, and as of tonight, September 29th, had we had an extra firefighter on each shift, we would have saved $114,500 in overtime this year. So again, this is a significant savings out of the fire department's overtime budget. I know we're always looking for ways to decrease overtime, and this is a good way that we can decrease overtime, increase firefighter safety, and increase service to the community. Year 4, so 2024, is when there are no more grant dollars, and so the city would be picking up the bill for those 3 firefighters. So when you figure in that perpetual overtime savings that we would have by having the extra personnel, instead of roughly $383,000 for 3 firefighters in wages and benefits, $383,000. We're only looking at about $125,000 of actual dollars when you start looking at figuring in that overtime savings. One last thing I want to touch on before I turn it back over to Chief Heston is the optics of what we're asking are not lost on us. We understand that other city departments are being asked to hold positions open and cut back on operating costs to assist with our current budget situation due to COVID. But the fire department's kind of in a unique position with these government grant dollars, and especially on top of the COVID waiver that FEMA's given us this year, that we can actually bring on additional staffing, but also achieve a significant decrease in our overtime budget. When you average it out over these 4 years, roughly $245,000 annually that we can decrease the budget across the board for fire. So again, the optics aren't lost on us. but I think we do have a unique opportunity to save some significant dollars while increasing our service to the community. And with that, I want to thank council and mayor for giving us the chance to present this to you, and I'll turn it back over to Chief Heston.
Thanks, Ray. And before we answer any questions, I just want to quickly echo what Chief Lateral said too. We realize what's going on here in the COVID in 2020. I just want to quickly review some of the staffing and kind of where we were and where we're going, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So in 20 and 21, council increased our staffing by 2 each year. So that allowed us to get to a 4-person at each station, 4-person minimum, which is huge. So that allows us to put 2 on each on the engine, 2 on the ambulance, and that was our big first goal. So that allowed us to increase our capability to achieve the OSHA 2 in and 2 out rule, which means you can't go in and fight a fire without 4 people, 2 in and 2 out, and then not have to call on the other station and wait for them to get there. So the OSHA safety standards, which require 4 people to enter and perform any structural firefighting operations. And through that, the Washington Administrative Code in Washington, the WAC, allows only 3 firefighters to go in and perform a known rescue. So where this grant actually helps is where the new person, the 9th person, is put on there. We can put a third person on an engine. And then if the ambulance is out on a call somewhere, that would allow the engine to roll in with a third person, at least to be able to perform a rescue. And a lot of times we're not able to do that because we don't have a third person on there. And if you recall, back in 2018, Camas, Washougal Fire Department, they were fined by Labor and Industries heavily because they went to a call, they had a trapped person inside, and they attacked it with only 2 people on scene. They made the decision to go in and rescue that person without the third person. So, and that is not allowed. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So that 9th person gives us more efficiency on fire scenes, enhances our fire operation safety, firefighter safety. It helps spread out the work a little bit. It moves us closer to the NFPA 1710 staffing recommendations of getting more initial resources on scene faster. It also helps with reducing our deficiency points through the Washington Survey and Rating Bureau, which is directed by council in one of our earlier presentations. And it also assists us in the accreditation guidelines for getting more resources on scene quicker. In year 4, obviously there's going to be a cost. 4 years from now, I would hope the city's recovered by then from COVID. We would have met our requirements for the grant. One option, which I think would be the last option, those firefighters could be laid off during that time. But I potentially recommend maybe we set aside a portion of overtime each year of the savings to cover that potential 4th year, if that's even feasible. I haven't talked about that with Finance Director Mike Urban yet to see if that's even a feasibility. So overall, we have 30 days to accept the grant. We have 180 days to hire. We worked with labor on this and they agree with the concept. So like Chief Lamoureux said, we wouldn't hire until after the 1st of the year to get them into that academy and start receiving that savings. So again, I appreciate the council's consideration and open up any questions you guys may have.
Right at the start, Mike, you said you work with labor. Have they agreed on a minimum staffing?
Yes, they've agreed with us to not increase minimum staffing and not increase the vacation. So, and to pull one of the floats off as well. So in concept.
Yeah. Let's go to Council Pat Wright.
So I have a comment and a question. Great report, Mike and Ray. Thank you very much. I, for one, never want to leave money on the table. And especially given the circumstance of our not having to provide a matching fund on this, it would behoove us, obviously, to take advantage of that. The question that I have is with the academy, and should we still be under the same COVID restraints? Will that still happen in the time frame that we're talking about in terms of, the congregational living arrangements, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the academy has been going on. Recently, we've had an outbreak at the academy, what they're trying to deal with right now, but they were working through that to make that happen as best they can. We would try and figure out any alternatives to that, Councilmember Wright, if we need to. So we would do our best to make that work. And Chief Lamoureux, could have some comments on that as well.
Pat, it's a very timely question. I was actually on a conference call with the academy staff today. And one of the options that they're looking at is their fairly new dormitories actually have 20 beds or 20 actual individual rooms. So where they would normally have a academy class of 35, 36 recruits, they've talked about decreasing that down to 20. So that way everybody has their own room. And of course, they're abiding by the governor's mandates with social distancing and masks where they can. And obviously with the personal hygiene and dormitory cleaning and all that. So that they are really doing a good job of trying to mitigate the COVID dilemma up there. Like Chief said, they are having a little bit of an issue right now that we're working through, but that's one of their major ideas that they're looking at, is to start limiting the classes, so that way each person, that we don't have any congregate living type situations.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a great question too.
Doing testing on a regular basis?
Sorry, Mayor, I didn't hear you.
Are they doing testing on a regular basis there?
Right now, they are not doing testing. This is the first academy class where they've actually had recruits test positive. So the 2001 class, which is Laban and Christian's class that we sent through at the beginning of the year, that academy was cut short because COVID was really ramping up around the state, and the departments that were represented at the academy wanted their personnel back. So none of the recruits actually tested positive during that academy. 2002, which happened from May into August, they made it through that whole 12-week academy with no COVID issues at all. So this is the first academy that they've actually had a recruit test positive. And so they are doing some testing right now, but in the past they have not.
Okay, Dan, I saw your hand up.
Mike, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just to follow up. Thank you, Councilmember Wright, for your question. We also are creating, we have a firefighter, this is for firefighter EMT, and we also are creating a firefighter lateral list as well. So there's a potential that we could hire a lateral that does not need the academy, so which could save us some costs, wouldn't have to go to. So we're trying to weigh all those options.
Great, thank you.
So I have a comment and then maybe a question. Thanks, Mike, for giving me a call yesterday to answer some questions about this. It does sound like this is an opportunity to realize some savings now, with the idea that we will have a deferred cost later at the end of the grant cycle. To the city will absorb a cost there, but this is potentially an opportunity for us to save some money over the next few years. And I think my question would be to Mike Urban, is this something where we can realize savings here that kind of relieves some pressure on the budget for other areas as well?
No, probably not, because when we look at it in the totality, there's still other departments that are understaffed. So the firefighters we'd be bringing it on for the first 3 years would be fairly revenue neutral if a fire hits their overtime that they expect to hit. It's an ambitious plan, and one I'll work with them on tracking and making sure that when we get to year 4, we have all the data to make the decision. But this is realizing the overtime savings is going to be a wait and see thing. And Ray has been through this, up one way, down the other, and he's adjusted the numbers as we've gone along. And yeah, if the numbers are there, then that's great. As far as putting some reserves off to the side to afford that, we want to be able to make sure we're raising enough revenues anyway, where we don't have to hold that to the side, because any dollars that we're putting in reserves in years 1, 2, and 3 to bolster these firefighters in years 4, 5, and X will eventually run out.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments, Ann Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. I like this idea for several reasons, and I do have a couple of reservations. I like the idea of, obviously, like Councilmember Wright said, this is money we should not leave on the table, and we should utilize it to grow our force. And in anticipation of eventually having a third fire station, this could be a good way to start to seed some of that labor for that. And I obviously like the idea of saving on the overtime. I am, of course, concerned at the end of the grant what our responsibility will be, but I am hopeful that at that point we would have enough revenue changes and increases coming in to be able to cover it. And then I am concerned about the employees themselves if for some reason we wouldn't be able to. But we have a lot of people at WSU and who deal with soft money. That's what this is called, where they are on a position on grant dollars and they come in knowing that that is what's funding them. So I think that I'm confident that the chiefs could handle that responsibly as well.
Nathan, I saw your hand up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ray and Mike. Ray, I've heard that you were quite instrumental with this. You are just the go-to guy for this grant. So congratulations on that. We're very lucky to have you. I will say as well, I know there's been some comments about, well, after the grant runs out, plain and simple, and I think many of us have expressed this over the years, Pullman is growing. We're going to need more employees. We're going to need more in the fire department. And especially, we see the amount of challenges with fires around the region. So I'm all for this, and I also think it's important to continue thinking about and be proactive about, the new stations and extending our reach into different areas of Pullman as we continue to grow outward. So I just wanted to put that plug in there because we definitely need to be thinking about 3 years plus. So good job, both of you. Ray, keep up the good work, man. All right.
Other comments from council? Brandon, did you? Yeah, go to Brandon next.
I appreciate it, Mayor. I have a bit of a hard time seeing being able to save $240,000 in overtime. I just the way things work, I think we would end up having a little more overtime than we think. But still, I mean, that's a lot of money. And Ray and Mike, as you mentioned, there are other places that are suffering right now, staffing included. I don't know the way Mike Urban would feel about where we use some of those savings or how those could be used, but I don't know, maybe in the next 3 years we can use some of those savings somewhere. I don't know if it's general fund dollars or where that would come from. The other option, of course, is taking that and putting it into year 4, holding that over. And if my understanding is correct from what you said, you don't think that would be a viable option. So I just wanted to confirm with you on that. Is that a less viable option, and can we use some of that savings? So if there's if we're getting about $552,000 in worth of labor we're saving, so I don't know what the difference is, but using that difference in less overtime towards something else. This is a Mike Urban question.
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. Putting the money in a separate fund to help fund years 4, 5, and 6 is absolutely something we can do, but it's just not a perpetual fund. It won't continue to grow. It'll continue to get spent down until it gets spent down to zero. So that was really kind of my point. I don't know what year that would be in. So also assuming that there's going to be additional overtime savings as those years go along. This decision is certainly kicked down the road to year 4. And we got to assume that we're post-COVID, but we have to assume, please be post-COVID by then. And get some other revenue generated. We've been looking at a lot of our internal costs, like plan review costs and those items that are a little lacking behind the times. So we can look at some other revenues between now and then, because the one thing I really don't want to do is to get 3 people to move to Pullman that, it's a great place to be, and then run out of money to fund them. That's kind of terrible. So it's kind of incumbent upon me to work with the chiefs to make sure we're realizing the savings that we are and making the adjustments that we are and finding those dollars within the existing budget. And as we can grow revenues to be able to supplement that.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Otherwise, I mean, I think the safety of our fire personnel is absolutely vital, and the work that they do to keep people safe is absolutely vital. So having those additional bodies, I mean, I think that just makes sense, especially as we are growing. You know, Councilmember Weller mentioned that, and you know, the third fire station and mentioned that. So I think all of those things. It makes sense since I mean, this is a lot of money that we're being granted here. So I say we go for that.
Pat, right, I saw your hand up.
Just another question. Historically, what has our attrition rate been? And so is it realistic to consider that at the end of this grant period, that we may already have been able to roll over these additional staff into vacated FTE positions? Or is that even a consideration?
One thing, thank you for your question. We rarely have any vacancies in the department. We hardly have anybody leave other than retirements. So, which is a great problem to have. So that's the first thing. First thing is any vacancies that we have, we would drop down in staffing. So that has a poor effect on us as far as increasing the overtime. So any vacancies we have, I can't pull people out of the office to go put them on the street to go work these positions. So it's a little bit different than the other agencies that we have in the city departments.
Okay.
The other thing too, Pat, is during the 3 years that the grant is in effect, we're required to keep a certain staffing level. So if anybody does retire during the 3 years of the grant, in order for us to not have penalties, we have to rehire that position.
Oh, got it. Okay. Thank you.
Dan?
No, that was just going to be my point, that the grant restrictions would say that we would need to rehire those positions. So potentially, if we were coming, you know, close in timing, if somebody retired right at the end of those that 4-year period, we, you know, that might be an option to not rehire that position, but we'd have to wait till, at least my understanding, Ray, would be we would have to wait till year 4, the end of year 4 for that.
That's correct. But if we did have a vacancy late in that 3rd year, FEMA does give us a grace period to get somebody hired, because obviously they know we just can't hire somebody overnight. But to be honest with you, I don't know how that would work as far as if that hiring grace period falls outside of the 3-year grant period, how that works as far as having to rehire and not have a penalty. I'd have to research that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just thought I'd throw that out there for consideration.
I've got a question on the 3 firefighters EMTs. Is that correct? Or can they be paramedics? Or is a safer grant strictly say firefighter EMT?
So the way I wrote the grant, we can go either or. There is enough money in the grant to hire medics. But we are so, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but we've looked at this, and we have so many medics. We even have medics right now that are complaining they don't get enough critical calls to really keep their skills sharp. So to add 3 more medics to the system would only exacerbate that problem. And so the discussions that Chief Scharnhorst and Chief Heston and I have had, it seemed staffing wise, it would be better to go with EMTs versus medics. But to answer your question directly, Mr. Mayor, we could do medics with the grant. There is no restriction there.
Considering over 70% of the calls are medic calls, and seems like sometimes you're short of medics, even though you say you have plenty. Mike, did you have any more comments on that? Or
no, I think we have plenty of medics in the system, Mayor. So, and these are firefighter EMTs. They still go on medical calls. So, and most of our medical calls are not ALS at times, so they would fit the bill just fine.
So during our other discussion we had earlier with Adam and Mike, and we were grilling you on this, I asked about remodeling the station. You said you had space right now that could accommodate these. You would not have to do any more remodeling at Station 2 or Station 1.
Yeah, that's with the fire prevention folks leaving here and going to the new city hall, we're going to convert that office into some bedrooms at Station 2. And we will have the extra space will be at Station 1 for the 9th firefighter.
Okay. Any other questions from council on this? And I think there's a few of us that have been on council for a while, and Pat and Al have been there, and we have seen reports from the fire department in the past that if we add X number of firefighters, we will reduce the overtime. And then generally we see a reduction of the overtime, and then it starts creeping back up again. So just want to make sure that statement is there. And Ray, go back to you.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Mr. Mayor. Having spoken to Chief Heston and those that are more tenured in the department than myself, when we have hired staff, we've never actually hired staff without increasing minimum staffing. So we've always been at that staffing level where when one person calls in sick, it triggers an overtime event. So I think our promise to council, as we are stating it tonight, is a lot more attainable, because we do have, with not increasing minimum staffing, we are going to have that buffer position. So I truly believe that we are going to be able to sustain decreased overtime levels.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. Any other comments from council? If Ann Parks, we'll go back to you.
Thank you. I just thought of something, Chief Lamoureux. Relating to what you just said, does the FEMA grant have any requirements in place for tracking of the savings on overtime, or any other reporting requirements that you would be required to provide annually, or during the grant period?
No, and that's a great question. The only stat that we have to track and report to FEMA is that we are keeping the number of staff that we would be at with the additional 3 firefighters.
I see. Thank you.
But again, you could report that to the council to find out how you are doing. I mean, that's one thing we do see in the budget reports we see from Mike Urban, is we do look at overtime, we do look at regular salaries. So
we'll definitely do that. So Mayor, I think President Mark Johnson, he was going to be on the public call-in tonight. I didn't know if he had any comments, if he's on there.
So is Mark on?
Nobody's on the line.
Okay. He could be on the call. Okay. So with that, I think we've had the discussion. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second to authorize the acceptance of a fire department FEMA SAFER grant. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That matter carries. We now go to item number 5. This is a discussion. This is not an action item tonight. It's a discussion of the Central Business District Trial Demonstration Project. And you can see that we said we were going to do it through a little bit of September, and Public Works thought ahead. They didn't have any permanent paint there. They've already washed off some of those lines. So Kevin Gardis, it's up to you.
Thank you and good evening. The downtown pop-up trial on East Main Street is coming to an end this week as M&O crews work to put back the striping and parking scheme that was in place prior to the demonstration. While everything is still fresh, we've provided a summary of the downtown trial in the memo included in your packets, describing what we did and what we learned. At Council's June 2nd meeting, the idea of a low-cost pop-up downtown trial was discussed. The basic concepts to be evaluated during the trial were born out of the recently completed CBD master plan and included a reduction of East Main Street from 3 lanes to 2, back-in angled parking on the south side, protected bike lane, and enhanced ADA parking. The proposed timing of the trial presented at the meeting of June 2nd was that city crews would have the pop-up installed within 2 weeks of council approval to proceed. It would then be taken down in late September, early October before the weather turned colder. Council authorized proceeding with the trial, and the pop-up was installed the week of June 15th. It's worth noting that at the outset of the trial, staff approached this as a work in progress exercise with the option of making revisions to the trial if needed based on feedback. Because East Main Street is a state highway, close coordination with WashDOT occurred throughout the project. City staff solicited citizen comments during the trial, and those are included in your packets tonight in both summary form as well as detailed information. Based on citizen and council feedback during the trial, staff recommended and ultimately implemented 2 revisions. The first was to open up the very westerly 100 feet or so of the south lane of East Main Street, just before Grand Avenue, to provide a left turn pocket at this intersection, which helped traffic flow smoother and was a big improvement. The second change was removal of the bike lane and creation of longer angled parking stalls to provide additional parking room for longer vehicles. And what did we learn? One of the things we learned is that the bike lane that was originally envisioned for the north side of the street definitely fits a lot better on the north side. And so when we made the change to remove the bike lane, we had gathered enough information, I think, to show people that it was viable to have it downtown. It's just the south side isn't the best location for that. But even so, we had a traffic counter, a bike counter set up in the block between Pine Street and Kamiakin, which is not in front of the bike shop, in case you're wondering. And there were, quite a few bikes that pass that counter every day. I didn't see them usually when I was out there walking on downtown, but apparently there were bikes going by. So a reduction of 3 lanes to 2 lanes did not seem to cause unacceptable delay in the central business district. But unfortunately, traffic volumes were atypical. One of the reasons we wanted to go into the fall was for WSU fall semester to begin and traffic volumes pick up downtown and see how that impacted the 2 lanes. While we know a lot of students did return to town because of distance learning, traffic patterns obviously have changed in town. So while we did see an increase, we probably didn't see the increase all the way up to typical traffic volumes we'd see in the fall. One thing we learned is that we do not have a lot of extra right-of-way width to play around with. So we don't have any extra buffer room here and there. It's fairly tight from a width standpoint to fit in all of the features that we discussed with the Central Business District Master Plan. They still can fit. It's just a lot of times, for instance, with a bike lane, WashDOT's design standards say 5 feet minimum for a bike lane, but 6 or 7 feet is recommended. So in that case, we may end up having to stick with a minimum bike lane because of the width we're dealing with, and not be able to go to the ideal dimensions in some cases. And that would be the same with lane widths and things like that. It's still all doable. It's just, it'll be a tight fit. Back end angled parking garnered the most comments. I'm sure that's not a surprise, with the majority of the comments being negative. Based on this, we think strong consideration should be given to pull-in angled parking with permanent improvements down the road. We did remove the bike lane, and that helped with the back end angled parking midway through the trial. But I think people still had problems with it. We got a few more comments after we made the change of removing the bike lane, and the comments were still negative on the back end parking. Keeping that west end of the south lane on East Main Street open is definitely something we want to consider for the future, as that improved traffic flow at East Main Street significantly. And one of the things we learned about the ADA stalls during doing this, and thanks to Councilmember Records for setting up a meeting for us, there are more than one type of ADA stall that should be considered. And we also need to consider locations, having one in every block and then having one alternating on different sides of the street. So it's not all the same style of parking for ADA, and not all on the south or all on the north or all in one block. So that's the basic summary of what we learned. We do have some some money budgeted. Well, it's been approved in CIP and TIP, and it's part of the draft budget that'll come before council in November. But we are looking at earmarking a little bit of money for a couple projects downtown to get started on some conceptual design next year. And we have money for High Street and for East Main Street. And my thought is that we would start looking at the conceptual layout of what we want the permanent improvements to look like, and go through some formal process with the council and maybe the citizens on improving a design, and then we could start looking for money and move forward with final design and construction. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And by the way, I also would really like all of your feedback tonight, if you would like to provide it, on what you thought worked well, what you thought needed improved, and whether you agree with the general direction we're proposing.
Okay, Brandon, I see your hand first. We'll go to you, and then we'll go to Dan, and we'll make sure that Eileen is heard too, because that's all right, Eileen, you'll be number 3. So Brandon, Dan, and Eileen. Okay.
Mayor, thank you. Kevin, I appreciate your synopsis there. I just think it's really important we go all the way back to the beginning of what was the onus behind this project, right? The downtown master plan. We are trying to help businesses. We had a number of businesses say, "Hey, we don't have enough foot traffic downtown." We wanted downtown to be inviting. We wanted it to be something that when we're recruiting faculty and people to SEL and other businesses, they can see this as a vibrant, fun place. And so all of those things came together to, behind this master plan. And so, there of course are going to be negative comments when we tried some stuff. I can't speak for everybody, but I know what I was clear on all my messaging to people is this was a test, right? This was a test before we invest. And the project, as it was given to us from BDS, included some really high risk type things like the back end angle parking. And what I didn't want to have happen is to just assume it wasn't going to work. And so we didn't do it. And then, 2-3 years down the road, we started playing what if we would have done this. So I thought this was the right time to try it. If we choose to do something else, right, head-in parking, for example, at least we know here's what people thought, and it was only in a 3-month time period. So I really think that this was the right thing to do. We heard resounding remarks from our residents that didn't like it. The bike lane, I know that there were some folks dismayed about that being taken out. And, as I tried to explain it to them, and I'm sure many of you did the same, is what I didn't want the baby thrown out with the bathwater. I didn't want frustration over feeling like cars were hanging out into traffic to be the thing that they threw their hands up and said, let's get rid of the whole thing, right? And so I don't know, Kevin, what your perception was, but I felt like even though we still heard complaints about back and angle parking, what I didn't hear so much was that they felt their vehicle was hanging out into traffic. And so that's one area that, at least in my perception, is that we were able to learn that maybe those vehicles needed a little more space if that was to be had. So moving forward, though, I think we've learned a few things that people like and what they didn't, and I've still heard a lot of comments from business owners, from residents, who downtown also belongs to residents, that they like having the 2 lanes, they like feeling the walkable, having the walkable nature of it. And I think we've got some options with the master plan to still make that happen. Maybe the parking on Main Street isn't going to be angled. Maybe that's just on Olson Street. Who knows? I mean, we can still discuss all those things, but I think the high risk things that we were talking about, especially the back end angle parking, which we knew that was the high risk. We at least are not going to look back in time now and say, well, what if we would have done this, but we never did. So we gave it a shot, and I say we regroup now with this new information, and we're still going to have folks that are going to be disappointed that that we're making changes to downtown, but we're doing this for a reason. And I did have a business owner who used to be in downtown and is not anymore, and was a little disappointed in all the changes going on. And I just reminded this individual that they were very vocal, 5 years ago, that they weren't seeing what they wanted to downtown. So we are trying to do something. And so I thank you, Kevin, for helping us with this, and for all my council colleagues for really, setting this as a priority. I think this is what we need to do for our city. And so some things didn't work, right? But we know that now. And so let's move forward and find the next best options. And I mean, COVID aside, I would love to be able to figure out a time to do a workshop and really hammer out the permanent structure of the downtown revitalization.
Okay, Dan, we'll go to you next.
I just want to say, Kevin, I really appreciate you and Clayton meeting with me, and we met with a resident to discuss kind of the specific, demonstrate some of the specific challenges that having van and wheelchair accessible parking creates on-street parking versus parking lots. So I really appreciate you taking the feedback from that meeting and implementing it in a couple of different trials so we could see how that might operate. Have you received any feedback on those spaces specifically?
I have not. Have you?
No, not specifically, but I will reach out to some folks and see if I can get some anecdotal evidence at least, to share with you on that. I also, on the, this is the controversial issue really seems to be around the back end angle parking. That was most of the negative feedback we got on that. But I think, and I think you're right that we need to put strong consideration of front end angle parking. But I also still think that it deserves kind of a fuller discussion of what are the implications of back end angle parking versus front end angle parking, and maybe some more communications about why that is a recommendation by some of those experts to try the back end angle parking, and some of the safety implications that might have. Because I think that's something that's not well understood by the public at this point. Is the actual what do the studies show where back end angle parking has been implemented on kind of safety outcomes? And I think that's important for the discussion that the public has a fuller picture of what are those safety elements. Because I know I saw in a lot of the comments a lot of people making assumptions about it being less safe. But I think we need to have that fuller conversation about those safety implications, because I would be a strong advocate for keeping that on the back end angle parking on the table, to make sure that we fully vet that out, and not just throw it out based on kind of this was a fairly short trial in terms of a transportation trial period. And for anything new like back end angle parking, that is such a transition from what people are used to in parking, I think that's something that there's got to be where cities have implemented that, there is a long adjustment period before people start to become comfortable with it. And I think the trial period may not have been long enough for that, but I think that should be a serious consideration in that discussion.
I can tell you that from what I've heard from people, the back end parking would be fine over there on another street that's not a state highway, so they could practice a little bit. Also, when you look at the old pictures of Pullman, we had angle parking at one time. So Eileen, you're next.
Yeah, Glenn, thanks for bringing that up. When we have our Kiwanis lunches over at Zeppo's, there's a great picture in there about the angle parking, and it's all Model A's along the street. And if you count up the number of spaces, it actually comes out to be about the same. But anyway, the backing angle parking obviously was not popular. The bike lane obviously was popular. So I think a lot of energy can go into getting that bike lane, whether it's actually on Main or whether there's some other way to put it in close enough to the downtown to make it feel like it's downtown. I think that's worthy of serious consideration. And one of the things that I noticed when there was some people parked, and Dan pointed this out, the crown on Main Street, it has a significant crown on it. And I noticed in backing in is that you get your nose pointed up in the air and you can't see the rear end of your vehicle very easily. The other places that I know that there has backing angle parking, I can't think of a single one that has even close to the kind of crown that we have on our Main Street. And I realize that's kind of an oddball point. And there's also kind of an odd aesthetic to all those cars parked with their nose in the air. It just doesn't look very good. Plus the fact it's real tight. And so, to use that old-fashioned expression, the map is not the territory, is that I think this was a great trial. I think we've learned a lot, and the more we hear from people about the nuances, because if we are trying to create a more positive atmosphere, more walkable atmosphere, I think a lot of these tiny little aesthetic points, all need to be taken into consideration. But I definitely want to get that bike lane, some usable area in the downtown, because it was very popular. The numbers on that are significant. But like I say, I think that crown on the street kind of knocks a lot of these things out of consideration. And there was no way of really knowing that until we saw the cars parked there. Thank you.
Yeah, Eileen, we'll go to Ann Parks next. And who wants to speak after Ann? Okay, we'll go to Pat. Okay, and then we'll go to Nathan. Okay, thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that in spite of all the complaints, one of the comments that really stuck out to me that I heard a few times and that I got personally was, thank you for focusing on downtown. Thank you for, the innovative ideas and trying them out. And so I think I don't think we can say enough about just the energy that we're generating and the excitement. I heard that word a lot as well. And I'm really grateful that we were able to do that and looking forward to continuing on with that energy. Regarding the parking, I didn't have a problem with it, but a lot of people did, and I respect that. I do think angled parking would be popular downtown on Main Street, and it probably will need to be front-end angled parking on Main Street. And then I do also agree with the mayor that maybe trying the backing in parking maybe on Olson by the library would be a good idea, to just give people an opportunity to do that. And really pulling out from that spot is so much safer, because either way you're going to be backing when you're parking. So here you're just deciding when you're going to be doing that. And I believe that keeping angled parking on Main Street, I do think people are innately uncomfortable with parallel parking. So having it remain on one side but giving an option on the other, I think would be very, very beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, Pat, and then we'll go to Nathan.
Well, you guys know, oops, sorry. There we go. You guys know how I feel about the back end parking. And that was my own personal opinion. And I was willing to, go along with whatever our citizens were thinking was going to work. Again, we heard very vociferously that people were not necessarily in favor of the back-end angled parking. I will say that just driving downtown today, just from an aesthetics standpoint, it just, oh my gosh, it just felt good. It felt very comfortable. It was very aesthetically pleasing. And I think some of that obviously had to do with we didn't have the cones out. Cars were sitting under trees. There was a lot more parking downtown than I've seen in a while. So just from that standpoint, I think that, I'm glad to see us kind of return to what somebody said, some kind of normal, at least. So people were happy with that. The other comment lately that I've heard is that people liked the 2 lanes. There's a question about really whether we do need that 3rd lane going straight. I think a left turn and a straight, a left and a straight could work well for people going up West Main. But I agree with what everyone else has said. We had to try it. It was a test. And I think that we shouldn't abandon what some of the positive things were that came out of this. And I certainly am in favor of the back-end parking, angle parking in a less trafficked location, just to give people a better feel for it and a better assessment of how it can be done. So thank you. And thank you, Kevin, for all the effort that you've put into this and, listening through countless oratories on how this could or couldn't work. So I appreciate your patience and your diligence in getting this done. Thank you.
And a big thanks to the maintenance and operation crew that had to put in the Jersey barriers, then take them out and move them and put the removable paint there. That was please compliments to the maintenance and operation. And I did wave and I did thank them what they were doing. Nathan, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's a good point. Anybody who's complained about how slow government is, I will say Kevin and the crews, I mean, the pivot that they were able to do so quick, very, very impressive. I think, Brandon, you summed up really nicely what we've learned and moving forward. And Pat, I agree completely with you. I would, the 2 lanes is great. I have heard other people say, hey, look, when you had those 2 lanes and angled, I'm personally a pull-in angler. I cannot do the back end. And I tell you what, I worked on farms. I did backing up of trailers. For some reason, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the pressure of everybody behind me, which I stopped up traffic. So anybody out there, I feel your pain if you've had this happen. So I will say that people have said the 2 lanes, the angled parking did create a feeling of kind of a home feeling downtown. It created a downtown feeling. And the difference between last year when I was eating at Oak on Main versus today when I was eating at Neil's Ice Cream, Flower, Ice Cream and Coffee Shop. Want to make sure I get that right. It's just night and day. I felt like more people were out. Maybe, I don't know why, but I'd like to think it was the change getting back to, as Pat has already said, a sense of normalcy. But I definitely do feel the 2 lanes angled in parking. So Kevin, thank you so much. You just, rock star. So, all right, that's all from me.
I don't know how we can go any higher than being a rock star, Kevin. So
it's a team effort, as you mentioned.
It is very much so. And Clayton was down there quite a bit, and you were down there supervising. So did you get enough feedback tonight from the council that you can come back with a quasi proposal, or are we going to possibly do what Brandon suggested, that perhaps we have a workshop sometime in the future?
I think I did get enough information tonight, so I appreciate that. I guess my thought is probably we should, assuming the budget gets approved the way we're proposing, we should get started on some of the conceptual design work, at least kind of build the base maps so that we can have a meeting and have a discussion from. So I think we need to do a little background work, upfront work, before we can jump into maybe a workshop in the future. So.
And Eileen, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I definitely support the 2 lanes. It gives us more elbow room to do other things. And again, sort of those strange esoteric points that I noticed that, of course, COVID contributed to the lack of people in town. But young people were kind of making spaces out of some of the parking spaces. Sure, they were using the plastic things for skateboarding and all like such. Maybe they shouldn't have been doing that. But I think it drove home the point is that people want to gather downtown. So to make those gathering spaces a part of the plan as we go forward, Kevin, I think is really important, because I think the people have demonstrated that they will work and live and play downtown, which is something that's been asked for and asked for and asked for. And whether it's just a tiny little place for, I don't know what, a teeter-totter or whatever, I think that is really, really important. I think people have told us with their actions that that's what they want. I'm loving this. Let's go for it.
And the other good thing with the 2 lanes is people obviously pointed out traffic was going slower. And that was been something else that's been a concern of people downtown. The other point, it was great to have 3 lanes back so you could have a turn lane on going to Grand. After you made that change where you backed it off where we could actually turn that lane, that was very necessary. So We can have the 2 lanes, but definitely have the 3 when you're doing the turn.
When we get back to or Grand Avenue.
Right. Any other last minute comments, or you've heard from Kevin? That's, I think we're good, right? Okay. With that, we now come to new business. I have not heard of any new business to come before the council tonight, and we have not heard of any new business to be brought up from the public as far as the public line is concerned. So with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're out of here at 9:40. Thank you.